This is DrTalks, real talk from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are talking to the one and only Dr. Jack Wolfson. He is here today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Cash. It's a pleasure to be on. And again, just really excited to share holistic heart health information for certainly the women. And, all these women oftentimes take care of the men. So kind of instilling that wisdom about heart health and wellness, to help support the men in their lives would be helpful.
For sure. And, it's your perspective is interesting and incredible. We're lucky to have it because you are a cardiologist. You've been doing this for so long. And everything we're going to talk about is why you don't do your cardiology textbook work anymore. Not that it's been thrown out the window, but you learned there's so much more to true health as opposed to reacting to cardiac issues. And what you're saying is we should all have this goal of 100-year-old heart. Like, let's live for that length. And it's not just live, let's be vibrant at that age. So what is the gap between here's conventional allopathic cardiology and that moment for you and what you learned and what we need to change?
Yeah, it's after spending 10 years in the biggest group in the state of Arizona, just dealing with the sickest of the sick and, just pharmaceuticals, procedures, and then you get your eyes opened to what it really means to be healthy and well. And you think about the foods that we eat and the lifestyle that we have and the thought processes that, that we should, have. And we think about all the advanced testing we can do, and there all the evidence-based supplements, and there is plenty of evidence on all this. And then kind of we wrap it up with biohacking strategies to support heart health. And I think when we do that, that's how we can get the 100-year heart. And I know you're a genetic specialist, and I think that when you overlay the healthy lifestyle on top of the genetics, we can really do some amazing things to make sure that we are really on path for 100 years and plus. But unfortunately, the medical community, the best they can offer is late 70s, for men, early 80s for women as far as longevity. And that's abysmal. I mean, I'm 52 years old and I've got young children. I would like to be a grandfather one day and have plenty of clarity and vitality and longevity, with the grandkids. And unfortunately, the standard medical community does not offer that.
Yeah, and you walk your talk. I just saw you in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, coincidentally, and you're walking around in a 30-year-old body, right? And you're doing it, and this is a challenge. You go to most doctors, and when you walk into the office and see who you're talking to, it's like, that guy's going to teach me about health,
Well, and thank you. And my body feels that age. I don't know if my hairline and my coloring, reflects, that as well. But listen, I didn't start on the path to health and wellness until I was 35. So for the first 35 years of my life, I ate the SAD, right? The standard American diet. And fortunately, I was able to escape from that without, serious health issues. And, and now I'm really on the path of prevention to prevent something bad from happening. My father would die of a Parkinson's-like illness at the age of 63. That was very motivational to me. And of course, meeting my wife, who is a DC doctor of chiropractic. And then she instilled in me that I need to become a DC, not doctor of chiropractic, but doctor of cause. And that's what, motivated me to move forward. But to your point, I mean, I left a group of 40 cardiologists and cardiovascular surgeons, and 2/3 of them were overweight, and probably 20% of them would be considered obese. So even if they knew the real health strategies, which they don't, they would not be very believable because they didn't follow any of those. So, I mean, listen, I mean, the cardiologists get not to smoke. I mean, so not too many smoking cardiologists these days, but after that, everything else that they do is totally unhealthy. Maybe some of them give, some effort to exercise. And even then, it's going to be in a blue lit artificial lighting indoor gym with all the toxins, EMF, all the chemicals inside of there. So yeah, you're not going to go to your cardiologist for health advice. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, you see it over and over again where, first of all, we're talking about the number one killer, right? This is what takes more lives than anything. So why is it that the heart is the first to go when it's lifestyle choices that are driving us there? Why are this is the big red flag?
Yeah, it's the heart is a pretty important organ, right? As all the organs are really, but of course, if we don't have a heart and a heart function, and the possibilities of all the different heart issues, whether it's a heart attack, congestive heart failure, heart rhythm problems such as atrial fibrillation. It's a major burden on society, and these violations or deviations from eat well, live well, think well are ultimately what leads to all disease. And again, back to your experience is that you take these violations of eat well, live well, think well, and you overlay it on someone's genetics. And of course, this family will have cancer, and this family will have heart disease, and this family will have Parkinson's and other movement disorders. This family will have a lot of autoimmunity, and some families, unfortunately, these days have all of them. And I think the other thing too is that, as we look at society in general, people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker at younger and younger and younger. And yeah, it's time for us to put a stop to it.
So what are those threats? What's changed? Like, we haven't changed. We're genetically the same. So people getting sicker younger, what's causing all that?
Yeah, our genetics are the same. It's just all how the environment and the food influences our genetics, and how our thoughts influence our genetics. And again, I've learned a lot of this from listening to you and people like yourselves. That again, the things that are changing are just more toxicity. There is just more environmental toxins that are available to us today than ever. There is more EMF, there is more air pollution, there is more synthetic and artificial compounds. The technology, again, back to the EMF story, right? The tech addictions that people have, glued to tech during the day, glued to the tech at night. Tech during the day, I think, is a reality. And I think that there's some amount of that is just comes with 21st century living. Listen, you're on the, you're looking into your device right now. I'm looking into my device right now. My cell phone, is 5 feet away from me. But really the tech at night, that's where it's got to stop. And unfortunately, a lot of people they do have nocturnal jobs, and they're night shift workers. Maybe they drive a truck at night, maybe they're a nurse working in the hospitals at night, or security at night. And it's just extremely unhealthy. It's, those people who are night shift workers have a much higher cardiac mortality than those who don't. So we're living in the sickest time on planet. And then not to mention the stress and the fear and the anxiety that everybody is under these days as we kind of come out of COVID, and what the stress and the fear and the worry of all that was, the anger and the depression and the social isolation that led to. So a lot of different factors that have stacked up upon us. And ultimately, I think also, people are just making the wrong food choices. We've got drug issues that are out there. So many different factors that are really against us, and certainly even the younger generation.
Yeah, so a lot of threats, and we know that our context is not aligned to longitudinal health anymore, and that's why chronic disease is so prevalent. So then it's like, okay, you've been doing this work and you stepped away from conventional cardiology, not that you don't use it, but there's other tools, including nutrition. So you've done the work and research. So let's start there. What should nutrition look like if we're stepping away from the SAD or the food compass or whatever? What is it actually? What's correct?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think just like our ancestors did, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. First they hunt, then they gather. And if I could say this, is that there's a lot of debate in the food industry, of course, and all the different food gurus that are out there. And they would say, well, eat vegan, paleo, keto, carnivore, whatever it may be. The reality is that let's just eat organic food. Let's just all agree to get the chemicals out of our food. So no matter what diet you're following, just make sure that it's organic. After that, I'm a huge wild seafood fan. The wild salmon, sardines, anchovies, clams, oyster, shrimp, lobster, crab, big fan of all those. And then nose to tail, ethically raised, pasture raised animals are going to be super important. And I am a proponent of gluten-free as well. There's no benefit to eating gluten. So there's no reason to eat. It can only causes harm without any benefit. So we choose to be gluten-free. And ultimately too, the idea of fasting and intermittent fasting and extended duration fasting, I love that concept, because the way that I visualize it is that as you get into some of these longer fasts, 48-hour, 72-hour fasts, that's when the body starts looking for fuel. And once a lot of your fat storage is gone, then the body starts looking for fuel because it's not coming in through your mouth, and the body starts to break down coronary artery plaque. It's not going to break down your brain. It's not going to break down your heart or your liver or organs that are necessary. It's going to start breaking down scar tissue that's not necessary. And that's all that coronary artery disease is. It's just scar tissue meant to heal an inflamed vessel. So as the body starts to break that down in extended fasting, that's when I start seeing, and I've seen this, plaque reversal, which which is a fantastic thing. So I think that pretty much highlights my food strategy for those coffee drinkers out there. I think coffee is great as long as it's organic, mold, mycotoxin free. Same thing with tea, high quality water. That's a good start.
Yeah, what you just said there is incredible, because I've never thought about it in that context. Because we think about, so again, you pointed at genetics a couple times. So we think about cardiac disease as this endothelium inflammatory problem, right? And like you said, scar tissue, then there's cholesterolemia, this buildup. And then I think of fasting as I'm burning the fat on my belly, I'm using fat as fuel, there's some fat removed from my liver, but I never quite went to, hey, you're stripping it off of the arteries and you're stripping it off the endothelium and you're reversing time, literally. So you've seen evidence of this.
Yeah, no, and I've definitely, because one thing I'm not really into, that to say the least, is I'm not a fan of CT scanning, coronary artery calcium scans. I don't like radiation exposure. I don't find that test useful. But for some people who have had the testing done and then against my advice went to have the testing done again, we are seeing plaque reversal from people who follow the whole plan. But in a lot of these people, the intermittent and extended duration fasting is part of that plan. And the idea really first came to me, Cash, was when you would talk to people who were doing extended fasting, and they would talk about how skin lesions would start to disappear and skin tags would clear up, and even skin cancers would start to clear up when you're fasting, as the body realizes that material is no longer necessary for whatever it's really just kind of storing junk in different places. So I think it is all simultaneous, that even as we are fasting and we are utilizing fat for fuel, it's not the only fuel. I believe at that moment when the body is starting to get rid of this excess storage tissue, scar tissue, and we'll see plaque reversal. And it's an exciting possibility. And the good news is too, is that like these are actually, not only is it free, it's a money saving proposition. When you do extended fasting, you're actually saving a lot of money because you're not eating. And that's eating is the biggest expense in my household. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, your money back in your pocket, also reversing disease. So that's a whole other load of cash back in your pocket, because you don't want to be paying hospital bills, So now what I've heard this, but obviously you would know this at a much deeper level than we would, that when it comes to a cardiac event, that women just fare so much worse, that they're more likely to actually not even to get through it. I think the number was 66% of women will die on their first cardiac event. They didn't even know they were sick. So what's the gap there? What's the disparity between men and women?
Well, I think it's a couple reasons. Number one is that it's still coronary disease is thought to be a man's disease. So even amongst the cardiologists and the emergency room physicians, when a woman comes in, they're just not thinking cardiac first. And that's a mistake. Now, women can present with chest discomfort, shortness of breath. That could be the sign of a heart attack. But sometimes we always have to pay attention, because sometimes the symptoms may be, I just don't feel right, or I've been feeling fatigued. And these kind of complaints or symptoms, the men often don't think of as being cardiac, but they truly are. So that's certainly one factor. I think also is that, listen, women are totally different from men, and that's obvious. But let me say this, is that the women, I think, really have this sixth sense, this radar about them that really senses danger much better than men do. And especially the premenopausal women, they sense that impending danger, which I think is something that we are genetically designed to have to protect us, during times of pregnancy. Again, it's just that pregnant woman, that menstruating woman has that sense of danger, and they know the environmental toxins and pollutants. So that is definitely a factor in why women, I think, suffer from symptoms in maybe a different way. And then let me say this too, is that women are uniquely predisposed to cardiac stress events such as SCAD, or spontaneous coronary artery dissection, the number one cause of heart attacks in menstruating women. And that is unfortunate, and that is highly stress related. And then number two, there's a condition called broken heart syndrome. The official diagnosis is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Takotsubo is a Japanese word, but the point being is that form of cardiomyopathy, the woman, it incurs a very stressful event. She therefore then suffers a heart attack. And it's not the classic thing where there's a blockage or any plaque that's visible. It likely is a coronary spasm from the stress, kind of the stress-induced autonomic abnormality, and then also stress-induced clotting abnormality that goes along with it. I think the two, that in combination, is probably the most likely theory as to why they developed this. But Kash, it's getting more and more common. We're seeing a lot of it, and stress is the instigating factor, and that is obviously a big time problem.
So when we think of, the classic plaque buildup, heart attack, that's one of many forms of things you need to be looking out for. And if you're not considering all of them, so then it sounds like, because I heard you say in the very beginning, you were talking about emotions and relationships. So it sounds like that's why that could be really important. I was wondering where were you going with that, but now I get it. It's your thoughts and your feelings can drive. So how do you manage that? Because somebody coming to you as a clinician, they're probably thinking, give me a pill, and then you're saying, no, your relationships are screwed up.
Yeah, it's people who come to see me, they kind of know what I'm all about. So they know they're coming for a natural approach as opposed to the old me, which is a pure pharmaceutical approach. And again, it's not because these men and women are not super intelligent doctors. I mean, they are. It's just they're trained in one particular thing, and they're just not trained in health and wellness. So with eat well, live well, think well, all of those are equally as important. So the eat is as important as the think and the living and all the way around that whole thing. So the whole concept, and I talk about this in my book, chapter 5 is called One Nation Under Prozac in my book, The Paleo Cardiologist. And it's not that women or men need Prozac for that matter. It's really telling people, hey, if you have anger, anxiety, stress, depression, you are at much higher risk of having a heart attack, stroke, and dying. And the answer is not Prozac. The answer is finding you're happy. The answer is self-acceptance and gratitude. The answer is spirituality. The answer is community. The answer is a sense of purpose and passion. The answer is to find security in your life. You have to be, all these things do take work and do take effort, but the idea of being secure in your own home, or secure in your job, or secure in your relationship. So those are kind of the big 5 things that we look at under the concept of think well. And if you're not thinking well, you're in trouble. And so many people just don't get that message. And it's just as important as the live well. And the live well component are the things such as sleep and sunshine and avoiding the artificial technology and lights that we talk about, especially at nighttime. Mold mycotoxins from water damaged buildings is a big thing that I've been lecturing on for several years now. The movement, everybody knows that exercise is good, but again, you want to be active and outdoors as much as possible. Get under the care of a chiropractor, see a holistic dentist. Those are kind of some of my main tenets to wrap it up. And like you said, so many people would just say, I don't want to do any of that, right? I'm not going to do any expensive testing, and I'm not going to eat this food, and I'm not going to bed, after sundown, and I'm not giving up my cell phone. Yeah, okay, well, don't do that. And you're, and they're like, well, I'll just take a pill. Well, go ahead. You can take the pill. The problem is you're going to die. You're going to die many, many, many years earlier than you should have, and you will not enjoy the clarity, the vibrancy, the vitality, and the longevity. It's a death sentence, and it's sad that people. Well, it's not even that they choose that option; they're not even given the option of the stuff that you and I are talking about, Kash. They're not even given the option of, hey, let's really take a deep dive into your health. They're not being told. And that's what, you, me, Mindy, and everybody else, we're trying to shout from the rooftops, hey, we got this better way over here, and it is the only way to longevity.
It's almost like the even just the process of being in the healthcare system forces you to think the wrong way that you were talking about, because one of the first questions you ask is like family history, right? And then you start to believe this is quote unquote genetic, meaning it's going to happen. And it's innate. And why should I bother working on something that's in my family history? Because it's part of my genetics. How much truth is there to that?
Yeah, and it's an easy out for the physicians, right? So the physicians, hey doc, why did I have a heart attack? It's genetic. Okay, really? So So 1/3 of the adult population has known coronary artery disease. Does 1/3 of the population have bad genetics? It's horrific. And again, that's why I love the stuff of what you're doing, because again, it's like, you take the genetic components and then you wrap on all these, different things of what we can do to kind of biohack our genetics, which is really biohacking the genetics in the 21st century. If we lived in the 9th century, we wouldn't have to do that. We would just be living in a hunter-gatherer, very healthy world, at that time. So, I think ultimately that as we, try and get people out of that family history type thing, you have a family history because you live the same way as your parents and your grandparents. If you want your health to be different from your parents or grandparents, you have to live a different lifestyle than what they did.
Yeah, I think the most extreme version of that I've seen recently was this interview on 60 Minutes, where I don't know the person's name, but it was some health advisor for the Biden administration came on and said that obesity is 80% genetic and it has nothing to do with lifestyle and exercise. And then about a week later, Ozempic came to market. So just to give people an idea of where you should get your information from, what you should believe. And, there's a little bit of a serendipity there and why that all came unraveled the way it did. But, I can assure you that genetically it's not 80% true at all. One thought and question for you, and this is just for me personally. So the heart, I know, has a high density of mitochondria, right? So we're hearing in these biohacking circles, everybody's working on their mitochondria. How much is there to be said for heart health longevity if you specifically work on that? How much difference does it make?
Well, I think that all the things that we talk about impact the mitochondria. So when you eat the right foods, it supports the mitochondria. When you live the right lifestyle and avoiding the toxins, it supports the mitochondria. When you think healthy thoughts, I believe that helps to support the mitochondria at the very least on a bioenergetic level. And then, of course, test, don't guess, and then use evidence-based supplements, and then the biohacking strategies. So the question is, does red light therapy or sauna or cold therapy or essential oils, do all these things kind of, or methylene blue is very commonly discussed in different circles. Do all these things help to support mitochondrial health? And they do. And again, I do believe there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals and surgical procedures, but it's at the end of the line as opposed to right at the beginning. So the mitochondria are absolutely critical. And I think that, so many different things can support mitochondrial function, and they're all inside of, how to eat, how to live, and how to think.
Okay, personal curiosity number 2, since we have your time. I keep reading that, 3-4 days a week of sauna reduces your chance of dying of heart disease like 30%, 35%. So what's going on there?
Well, what's going on there is that the literature that comes out of Finland is really the most effusive about the benefits of sauna. And that's where you can see dramatic reductions in heart attack, stroke, and people dying is when they have frequent sauna use. And that is from the old style sweatbox sauna. So there undoubtedly is benefits to the sweating and to the heating, of the system, if you will. But then you add in the infrared component that a lot of these new companies are using. And I think that's where you really upgrade the whole process, where the infrared energy, that longer wavelength of light is getting into the mitochondria that we're talking about and is really improving mitochondrial health and function and cytochrome function. So we're making more ATP, we're generating more cellular water, we're improving the electromagnetic fields from the mitochondria that are being generated. So lots of different benefits from sauna and that aspect. And I'm a big fan. Cold therapy, it's not that I'm not a fan of it. I really don't like doing it. So I think that there is value to it. And I don't think anybody necessarily loves getting in the cold tub. I'm a 35-year in Chicago guy. I know you're a Toronto guy. That's why I left Chicago, because I didn't like the cold. So I can't say that I dig on that, but there's a lot of different things. There's something for everybody. And it's really just an amazing time to be around, to be able, to do that. I just want to make that comment about the obesity too, and kind of go back to that, for a second, as far as the genetic link to obesity. And obviously, as you said, right afterwards, now they're going to release a new drug, for weight loss. And, ultimately it's everything is driven by money. Everything is the power of the pharmaceutical companies is just, I mean, it's more than, I don't want to say it's more than the military complex, but it's right up there with the military complex. Pharma, military, they're the biggest influencers and controllers of the world. Add in banking on top of that. Now we got maybe the triumvirate of where that all goes. And if you think about people from 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, or I like to quote the movie or talk about the movie Castaway with the actor Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks, he's on the island, right? And he eats coconuts, fish, and avocados. He's in the sun, all day long. He goes to sleep on time. He wakes and he watches the sunrise. There's no chemicals or pollutants or toxins at any high level in that area. You live like that, you'll never be obese. If you are on that island, there is no chance you will be obese. There's 0.00% chance you will be obese. So obesity, yes, I mean, you could be genetically predisposed to obesity, but it's all, what you put into your mouth. And then also, again, how you live your life. It's not just about food. When you get less sunshine, higher risk of obesity. You get poor sleep, higher risk of obesity. More environmental chemicals and mold mycotoxins, higher risk of obesity. A lot of different factors that go into it.
Yeah, and that sort of commercial influence you talk about, as a Canadian, every time I fly into the US, which happens a lot, there's always this culture shock of turning the TV on and seeing the pharma commercials. The US is one of 2 countries in the world that actually allows pharmaceuticals to be advertised direct to the public. And the other country, I think New Zealand, it was only because of some special need for this senior product that came out that they needed awareness around. We're talking about the number one advertiser, the number one buyer of advertiser in the country is pharma, right? So
yeah, I mean, believe me, I guess I'd like to live in a world where there is a rule maker and it's me, right? I get to make the rules. So since that is not the case, I don't make the rules, then I think that, freedom to choose is the ultimate thing. So I'm not going to dissuade pharmaceutical companies from advertising on television. I think obviously that's a problem, but I don't think the solution is to ban pharma advertising, because they'll find, I guess, some other ways to do it. I think that the thing is that it's just the reimbursement for the pharmaceuticals. It goes back to the whole kind of this whole idea that pharmaceuticals, I guess, are the answer. And if we just start from the bottom, from just educating like you and I are right now, just reaching directly to the people and saying, hey, that's not the answer. That's how I think we'll tear it all down. And then when we stop giving them all the money, then they'll stop advertising. But that's one way I would look at it, because I think whenever we get into the, rule makers making the decisions, then we may like that rule, but then we may not like the next rule, where they ban natural health from social media because they deem that as detrimental. So I don't know, but I mean, but your point is well taken. Yeah, I mean, it's like every other commercial. Either they're selling us some kind of processed garbage food, or they're selling us something for our health problems. And if you think about this television addiction, this media addiction, well, then the next thing you're up until 2:00 in the morning and you're watching TV, and then you're watching TV and you get a commercial about take this pharmaceutical to help you sleep.
Yeah, no kidding. So one thing we didn't touch on, we talked about food and nutrition and the environment and energy. And so the other thing that people think about when it comes to maintaining heart health and preventing diseases, their fitness, their exercise. And we see a lot of there's some conflicting, talk about, for example, Peter Attia talks about you got to get your zone 2 and you got to do this many hours per day and you got to do it every day. And then some people like, don't overtrain. You're going to strain yourself. So don't get into oxidative stress and create free radical activity. So what is that balance? What do we actually seek?
Well, I think that's, great questions. And that when we think about oxidative stress, oxidative stress by definition is an imbalance where we have more pro-oxidative things happening and not enough antioxidants that are happening. And that difference is what's called oxidative stress. And what we want to do is, if we are generating a lot of oxidative stress, like you said, in the form of free radicals, well, then we need a lot of antioxidants to combat that. And that could be things such as vitamin C, vitamin E, omegas, glutathione, alpha lipoic acid. It could be all those generating activities, but also the internal enzymes that do that, such as superoxide dismutase and catalase. And those are critically important enzymes that are there to, kind of nullify all that excess oxidation that's going on. So we want a good balance there. And ideally, we really crank up the levels of superoxide dismutase is how we're really going to do it. And as far as, people kind of talking about, the best, exercise and stuff like that, I just kind of go along with it, really just try and do Paleolithic activity. And that may be more along the lines of a typical CrossFit experience. For example, our ancestors, I mean, what kind of exercise did they do? They didn't go on the treadmill for 45 minutes, and they weren't running marathons. So clearly that's not the answer. It was more that burst activity, running towards someone or running away from someone or something, right? Picking up a boulder and throwing it over there as you're building shelter. You're carrying water, you're carrying children. It was just a very physically active activity and lifestyle of what they were always in motion. They were always moving. They were never really, sitting to this kind of degree that most people sit, certainly not the posture even that I'm sitting in right now, and you are as well, right? They were always up and they were always moving around. I think almost like the behavior was kind of like a dog, how like a dog, would do it, right? When a dog wants to chill, it's just laying there and just chilling. Otherwise, it's up running around. And I think humans would be wise to follow with that. As far as kind of like other things is, time duration and heart zones. I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting for people who are truly into biohacking and doing various, I'm gonna tweak this particular thing and see what the impact over here is. And maybe that's more of like for professional athletes. The rest of us need to understand we just gotta get up and be moving around during the day. We just can't be sitting around. So, going for a walk in the morning, a walk in the noontime, a walk in the evening. Hiking is a phenomenal activity. We're huge mountain bikers in our home. We love outdoor winter activities, skiing and snowboarding. We love this additional summer activities, stand-up paddleboarding, etc. There's there's so many articles that talk about gardening, just having a garden, and how that decreases heart attacks and increases longevity. So those simple strategies, that's how I would do it.
Yeah, that makes sense, because when you say that, it makes me think, like, when you think about longevity, so the 100-year-old heart, how many pro athletes do you see that are 100 that are healthy? When you look at the centenarian, it's usually an Italian grandma, right? And you look at the blue zones, and it's more about their relationships and their everyday lifestyle. They walked everywhere, they moved all the time, they were cooking, it was more it's from the minute they woke up to the minute they went to sleep, what do they do all day, as opposed to this 30 or 60-minute activity that they added to their day.
Yeah, they weren't sitting, right. They weren't sitting in front of the TV. And I think also, to your point, like the relationships, right? I mean, so the relationships, whether it's going to, some kind of religious institution, or having that spirituality, having that tight-knit community that's so supportive of them and that they're an active contributing factor to it. I think that was absolutely critical. But, I always just default to how our ancestors did it. So, and I think, what happened, and certainly my experience of running, marathons and long, duration triathlons, is I was guilty of this because I didn't know any better, right? I would run a couple miles and then have a power bar, and then run a couple miles and drink some Gatorade. And there was even a race I did where every 5 miles they had a Krispy Kreme donut, stop. So if you're generating all of this, oxidative stress, because what happens is that your body is taking all of the food that you have consumed and the oxygen that you're breathing, and it's going through the mitochondria, and then it's generating a lot of waste products in that process. It's just the fuel. Think about, again, if you have a nuclear reactor and it's just like this toxic nuclear waste that is here at the end of it. And if you don't do something in order to neutralize that, then you're going to be in trouble. So I think if you are doing long duration activities, and I get all the joy of that, you just got to make sure that you're fueling yourself with some wonderful, wonderful foods. And then also getting that sunshine, getting that sleep and that recovery. So I think that's a great strategy for that. But you mentioned the athletes and whatnot, and they're not, I think it's better now than probably it was, several years back. But clearly the longevity favors the people who eat well, live well, think well.
Yeah, I guess physical fitness and health are not necessarily a given. Like they're two different things. You need to work on both of them. And we saw this during COVID, like guys that were in top shape getting knocked out because they're metabolically unhealthy because they lived off of protein shakes and linoleic acid laced chicken, right? And then they just weren't prepared for this viral load.
Yeah, I think also, one of my favorite examples is the actor his name was Bob Harper from America's Biggest Loser. It was a weight loss show that was on, and he was like the celebrity trainer who was on there. He had a massive heart attack, and everyone looked at him and he's like, he looks like he's Iron Man, right, on the outside. But what's going on the inside? And that's clearly where the problem was. And I don't know Bob Harper's specific case, but I could postulate that, again, here's a guy who lives in New York. He doesn't get a lot of sunshine. He's in the artificial light. He's on camera, presumably under stress. And I don't know any of the other factors in his life. And maybe he ate, pretty good food, and he certainly seemed like he exercised. But, clearly that wasn't the answer for that guy, because there were so many other things that were really going wrong in someone like that's life. And, certainly if you're overweight, you are unhealthy. But just because you are of normal weight and aesthetically look good does not mean that you're healthy.
Yeah, amazing. So I know, like, your perspective is so like refreshing and unique in this world, going through cardiology, which unfortunately most people will at some point, given the American average. How hard is it to work with you or find someone that thinks like you and, not be in that just wait and see type system?
Yeah, unfortunately it is tough, Cash, and there's just not many people, like us in the health related fields. It's just the way that we're trained, the way that we are financially compensated. We are brainwashed into this sickness system. But there are some of us who have broken free, and there's, I could probably name, 10 to 15 to 20 cardiologists who have a similar mindset to me, certainly not exactly the same. I think I run pretty extreme even amongst, those circles as far as what my beliefs are for health and wellness. But, you can ask around, you can go on to Google, I would search, integrative cardiologist, holistic cardiologist, near me, and see what people come up with. I'm still in practice. I'm out in Arizona, and I practice virtually as well. And I've got 2 naturopathic doctors, a chiropractor, and a team of health coaches. And I got a lot of wonderful free information on my website. So, I think that, I think the truth will win. I think we are really in the beginnings of another health, awakening. But I think now more than ever, people are waking up to true health and wellness.
And the website is Natural Health Doctor?
naturalheartdoctor.com. Yes, but I appreciate you and everything that you're doing, to educate the world and all the methodologies you guys are doing. And certainly, Dr. Minnie Pels, as far as, Fast Like a Girl and being a fasting expert. And she is a doctor of chiropractic. And that's what woke me up to the reality of health and wellness, was the fact that I would meet a woman when I was 34 and she was 29, and she's a doctor of chiropractic. And she said, this is the way that it is. And it made perfect sense.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Eye-opening, really refreshing, way to think about our hearts and heart health. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. Talks. We hope today's episode has enlightened and inspired you on your path to optimal health. Each day is a new opportunity to make choices that empower your well-being. For more insights and strategies, subscribe to our podcast and visit our website, www.drtalks.com. Stay connected, stay healthy, and join us next time on Dr. Talks, real talks from real doctors on the issues that matter to you most.